Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should. And please check out getitinwriting.net/shows for a full list of our podcasts and YouTube series.
My guest is Mr. Henry McGrogan. He is the CEO of CEO, which is a Central European organization.
Yeah, correct.
And I know that as we were just previously discussing before we started rolling tape, your background was originally in audio and then you went into management. You have had a very eclectic roster. When we met, you were just on hiatus from managing Mr. Iggy Pop, and you were taking on a brand new band called The Coors. Mm-hmm. And I remember you I remember we met just prior to one of their sound checks. I think it was at Montreux, but I'm not quite sure. And you mentioned to me that these guys are quite good. You're going to like them. And then sure enough, they definitely blew the stage away. Quite good. And, but again, I remember thinking to myself, wow, this is a bit of a departure from the Igster. And so let's sort of set the stage here a little bit. Tell me about your own background, because I know you also come from an audio background, at least originally. So do you start with a musical background?
No. I get into this business when I was probably around 16 or something through having friends. I know. Through having friends who had a kind of, local covers pop group, whatever one wants to call it. And we all had, like, at that time, I was 16. So yeah, we were able to, we had scooters, like Lambrettas, Vespas, that kind of stuff. So there's a whole bunch of us used to just all hang out together. And there was maybe 4 or 5 guys amongst that were involved with having this group, which they asked me to come along and see them play one weekend at a local sort of lounge bar thing, which I did do, and kind of helped them out with their gear. And I kind of liked the vibe of the whole thing, and I thought, well, I kind of like this. Wonder when the next one is going to be. So I just sat down with them and spoke about how many shows I've got, gigs coming up in the future, and then I asked, could I just come along, help out, carry their gear and just be part of the thing, which of course they were glad to have extra people along so they don't have to carry their own gear. So that's how it all started. And then from there, I progressed into, I got my driving license. I became the van driver. So then we had the transit van, partitioned off with the bus seats and the gear in the back, and started getting off for weekends and weeks doing shows around Scotland, town halls and lounge bars. And then I started actually booking some of the shows, just, picking up the phone, calling local town halls and councils and people up and just finding my way around how I can book a gig. And started doing that. From there, it just progressed into more of a reality where more established and known groups in the Glasgow area contacted me to go and work with them. So I just looked upon that as less of a part-time thing and more of a full-time thing. They were actually going to employ me and pay me money to do something I was enjoying doing. So that's what I did. It escalated from there and group to group around Glasgow until finally one of the groups I was working with, a band called Slick in 1976. They were quite a famous pop group. Midge Ure, who later Ultravox, he was the lead singer of the group. They had a big pop hit in the UK in 1976 called Forever and Ever. It was #1. Did a lot of Top of the Pops TV. So that expanded my horizons into the bigger scale of things around the UK. Was down in London a lot, met a lot more people. And then from there, started touring Europe. And so there was a truck driver, carried the gear, set up the sound, did some guitars, backline, all of that stuff. It was a 3-man crew. We did everything basically all in one 3-ton truck. Did that for a few years until they broke up. Midge joined a band called the Rich Kids. I don't know if you remember them.
I do, yeah.
Glenn Matlock was in them, and then Midge took me then down to London to work with them, which I toured with them for a while. Came to the end of that. Glenn got the gig working with Iggy as a bass player, who in turn got me involved on the tour that was upcoming. Said, would you want to do the tour if I can get you involved? And I went, absolutely, yeah. So I met the tour manager at that time, who was Dennis Sheehan, God rest him, who was later became U2's tour manager. And then the rest is history, as they say. I've been working with Iggy ever since 1979, with breaks in between, of course. But so progressed from doing sound, from stage manager production I was doing at that time, went on to doing front of house sound, and then eventually tour manager, which I did right through until 2005, when his manager at that time, Mark Collins, sadly passed away suddenly. And then Iggy asked me, would I fill the shoes and be his manager, basically, or at least give it a go and see how things panned out, because we knew each other so well. So, and went from there. In between all of that time, I'd tour managed and did sound with so many other groups in the late 70s and 80s, through all the downtime periods of working with Iggy. So, and then, from 2005, I got into management and set up the company over here in Warsaw, and been going from kind of strength to strength ever since. I mean, that's going from start to finish quite quickly, but I've missed it a lot in the middle. But it'll take too long for me to sit here waffling on about it all.
Oh, that's quite good. That was, what, 40 years and 40 words. That wasn't bad.
Yeah.
But what strikes me about that is you had sort of a similar beginning to a lot of us, in that you walked into something, you had no idea what you were doing, but there was a willingness there to just try everything.
Exactly. And it was fun. And if you were a music fan, as I was, and I'm sure all of us were at that time, we loved music. So being part of something that we love was just a great feeling, and we had fun doing it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't, as you probably know, wasn't really considered that much of a business back then either.
No, and roles were not that defined. That's the thing too. I think roles were not clearly defined, and
exactly.
So, you were basically doing a little bit of whatever was needed.
Yeah. Everyone did what they brought the strengths to whatever needed done, and then once each person found the strengths of what they were doing, saying, okay, well, you're going to take care of the guitars and drums now. You're going to take care of lights because that's your thing, etc. And that's how it broke down. And then everybody just, all the peripheral things that needed done, everyone just mucked in to do them,
Yeah. And, it's the other thing about that is that it helps you to become very well-rounded in terms of not only gaining certain skills, but also having an understanding of how the entire ecosystem works, so that even if you become an audio person, you have an understanding of what the lighting people are doing. You have an understanding of even, what the catering people are doing. And I think that's all very important in terms of having an empathy, first of all, for other people's jobs, and also having the ability to be able to not necessarily fill in, although that's part of it as well. If you needed, you just grab something and do it. But also being able to help coordinate things, which obviously must have contributed greatly to your work in management, because you were able to really understand the big picture, so to speak.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's like being in the shop floor basically, and just learning your trade, working your way through it till you get to that kind of management level. But you've got an understanding of, as you say, the big picture. And you can relate to certain things. When you're on tour, for example, certain people who did certain things, you could really relate and home in on certain issues that you could see either a problem with, or a potential problem with, or trying to sort of help them out in some way or form if you could see some sort of look of puzzlement or worry in their faces. So I think it was just a good overall, and I think even still learning as you were doing something else, but you were still sort of learning and interested to what was progressing technically through the different fields of the departments in the business, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And then especially you were coming up in an era where the technology itself, as you say, it wasn't really necessarily clearly defined any more than the roles were. And there really was a tremendous upheaval at that point in terms of the audio technology, you went from basically stacks of sort of thrown together speakers with, nothing matched and everybody's sort of making their own, to what you have now with, fully integrated systems. And all of that was an evolution too, wasn't it?
Oh, big time, big time. I mean, well, I started out with it. WEM Audio Masters, I think, was the first thing I used with the WEM stacks.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I think Pink Floyd had all that, what used to have a WEM PA. So it was kind of like, on the basis that, the WEM Copycat, the WEM Audio Master, and the WEM columns. That was your PA. And then progressed into, I think Yamaha around the late 70s had this kind of all-in-one box system. It was a three-way speaker system, but amplifiers built in, which were kind of just like cubed, and they were able to stack up and you could fly them or do whatever, but there wasn't much flying in those days really. But that was the next sort of level of technology that I got myself into, with the Yamaha desks and stuff. But yeah, I mean, the way it's evolved now is just incredible. And I watch Max Bisgrove, who I'm sure you know, front of house engineer, who did the cores and also does Iggy. Max and I were out a couple of weeks ago doing some stuff with Sharon. And, I watch what Max does and what you can walk into, and also what's provided locally in each venues now compared to what wasn't there before, or what was there before. I mean, it's just incredible. You can take your show on a stick now, basically plug it in.
Yeah. Whereas before, if you walked into most places, they didn't have any gear at all, and if they did, you were probably better off not touching it.
Yeah, and I remember my first American club tour in the late 70s. It was pretty amazing for us going over there at that time, because the amount of clubs that were available where, bands could tour, but also the equipment and house systems that they had, which were pretty great at that time for where we came from in Europe, because the clubs in Europe never really had in-house systems at that time. Everything had to be brought in. So to walk in to be able to do all that stuff, which was, again, great, but a real hit and miss situation depending on the club or bar you were going to be doing a show in, and how sticky things were with the amount of drinks that may have been flung over faders or whatever, what was going to work and what wasn't. So, but
depending on who had been there the night before, right?
Yeah. So, I was glad to have been around all of that and watching the way everything evolved in every aspect of the business, really.
Yeah, and this was with Iggy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, so I can imagine which clubs you were playing, and a lot of them were, shall we say, unusual venues.
Very unusual. Some of them, yeah. Some of them were probably I don't know, what do you call them, topless bars in the afternoon or something like that. Then they became a venue in the evening, or they were attached to one of those sort of places. It's like those establishments. There was a lot of them around in America.
Sure. Yeah. So I'd like to get into a little bit of the whole transition to management with you, because I think that in itself is also a completely different skill set. And particularly because as a manager in any sense, and this again is sort of the evolution of the hierarchy that happened because roles were not clearly defined. As you say, you sort of stepped into management, or more or less were pushed into it. But there's a certain den mother, Mr. Fix-It kind of role there, where you have to really be taking care of literally everything from, I got the wrong hotel room to, PA is broken to tour arrangements and flight arrangements and carnets and everything else. Obviously, having all those different skills is an advantage, but just juggling all those things, it takes a certain kind of mindset, doesn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And, for me, it's something I haven't really let go of either. It's I'm still kind of micromanaging in many ways, and I'm still and we're a small office. It depends how busy we are. We bring some other people in, but we just try and keep things as compact and as close together and work together and do as much as what we can here. And I still do a lot of that, setting up pre-tour stuff before I hand it over to a production manager or tour manager. Because, then I know the basis of how everything is done. I know who's involved. I know what the costs are. So, it's like handing it over then. Okay, there's a little bit of maybe friction in the transition period and the one person picking things up, but it gets smoothed out and things go from there. So,
it's hard to let that go sometimes, though, isn't it?
It's difficult to let go, do you say?
Yeah, when you're so accustomed to micromanaging, it's a little bit hard to hand it over to someone else because they're inevitably going to do it differently than you would.
No, absolutely. That's the thing. And even when I maybe we'll get on the road for some dates, I'm just hovering about, and I'm just kind of like, well, I wouldn't do it that way. But I might just sort of step in and go, remember, you're only here for a couple of days. Someone else is running this whole thing. Don't go in and fuck it up,
It's the old saying about just asking yourself if any of this is really going to matter a year from now, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. But I'm also thinking, in terms of the mindset, I mean, you have always been, at least as long as I've known you, you've been a pretty laid back person, at least on the surface. I can imagine that, the still waters definitely run deep, and there's probably, absolute chaos the size of Manhattan going on in your brain. However, you come across as a very relaxed individual. And I think that must be a very useful skill, especially when you're dealing with these very disparate personalities, like going from an Iggy Pop who, pushes the boundaries in so many ways, and then, going to a band like The Chorus, who I'm sure, knowing some of those individuals and hearing some of the stories and everything. I mean, we're all in the rock and roll business. There are certain things that are, sort of truisms with everyone, but at the same time, it's a completely different culture and a completely different environment. And then you go to, as you say, you work with some electronica artists, some EDM artists and whatnot, and some avant-garde artists. It's transitioning all those cultures. What kind of a challenge is that for you?
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty challenging, but I mean, there's certain things, even with some of the things we're doing now, I'm not going to hold my hand up and go, oh yeah, I know every single thing about that, because I don't. And my partner, Anya, she takes care of some of the other stuff, and I'll go along and help out in some situations. So I'll get involved in as much as I think I know about certain things. And as far as the cultures and the music and other stuff like that, I think growing up listening to all types of world music, rock and roll, whatever, pop, you've got an understanding of that side of the cultural side of that. And also you're traveling in terms of cultures of places and customs and how people react and how certain people are at certain places and do certain things. So you mix all of that together, and you kind of you pick out you kind of handpick and make up a menu, basically, I guess, is what you do for what you're going to be doing that particular day or week or whatever. And just try and keep in that mindset and that thought of like, where you are, who you're dealing with, and keep it going that way, And if you're getting calls or anything from any of your other clients when you're away doing a certain situation, then you've got to just kind of wipe everything clean for a minute and just recalibrate, and then just think of who you're talking to and go, okay, right, you're going into that sort of mode now, and deal with that. So,
right. Yeah. I can imagine interesting scenarios there where you're, all of a sudden, you're neck deep in typical Iggy chaos, and all of a sudden you get a call from, a completely different type of artists. And yeah, you have to literally switch it off and switch it back on again, so to speak.
And I have to say, I mean, there's not really much Iggy chaos these days, in all honesty. That was a long
he's
time
matured,
ago.
Yes. I've heard
he's pretty organized chaos now, in terms of, that time he goes on stage, or even when he arrives in the venue, it's not even chaotic. It's just, he's very regimented and routined, and you know what to expect. And it's the same, I guess, when he goes on stage, he's pretty much, he kind of knows what he's going to do, but then the variant will be how the audience reacts to him, and then that will just change, either push him up a gear or move him down a gear, or just whatever. So it's all very controlled chaos, and you might get the odd kind of curveball thrown at you, which you've always got to be looking out for, which is fine. And
which is the case with everyone, really.
Yeah, and that just makes it a bit more, kind of keeps you on your toes, and makes it a bit more interesting, shall we say.
Mm-hmm. It must be interesting to be in that role of, even though, as you say, he's, a lot of that is a facade, and a lot of that is an act, obviously. I mean, there is a real intelligent, lucid individual behind a lot of that chaos. At the same time, you are then put in the position of being sort of that person who, at least to the world, represents the sane facade. So in other words, nobody's going to approach Iggy because they're going to be afraid of him. And so they're going to designate you as sort of the, shall we say, the spokesperson, the bridge to the business aspect of it. It's a lot of pressure too, isn't it?
Yeah. But, it goes with the territory, and it's like I say, with everything, it's, you got to know who you're dealing with, and certain aspects of how volatile those people may or may not be, and being able to read them and how they're going to react to any situations. And as you say, like, being the person that's, I guess, the mediator, the buffer, the spokesperson, whatever, on the other side of people who don't know the real person, but only know them from what they see on either TV or a live show, and there's a lot of people look upon that and think that's how he is all the time.
Sure.
That's how they are all the time.
Sure.
But there's, and there's a real, it's like, even now, like, Iggy's 74. Now, I get requests every day for all sorts of things for him to do, but there's still people think because he's Iggy Pop, he can do anything he wants to do, and they can get him, ask him to do like Iggy Pop type things, whatever, But this is like a 74-year-old Iggy Pop you're dealing with. He's still a very, very sharp, very intelligent, and knows exactly what he wants sort of person, and really like plans and works on his shows way in advance. I mean, we're touring, starting again May next year, and we had a chat today about certain things, and he's already planning things for himself, like physically, mentally, logistically, all sorts of things. We've been through everything, like, so he's just all the time thinking about and planning and making sure he's going to have his shit together when he walks in to do anything. Mm-hmm. And by God, everyone else associated better have their shit together as well.
Sure.
And that's how it should be,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to circle back to something you were mentioning before about the whole idea of micromanagement, because there's a sort of there's a dichotomy there of, on the one hand, needing to have this sort of overview and being in control to a certain extent of almost everything. And at the same time, as you say, you don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. You want to be able to have people to whom you can delegate things and depend on to execute those things.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that sort of an ongoing battle within your own brain?
Very much so. I'm terrible at delegating. But it's like, what the worst part for me is sitting in an office and doing all that stuff, because that's when I really just like, it's all mine. I've got to take care of this and I've got to deal with it all. Once you let it go, it's still, certain things are going through the back of your mind and you're checking on people all the time. Well, I tend to do that. Then I get to a point thinking, God, these people must be sick of me just going on and on. I'll just lay off. And then when you're out in the field, as it were, and you're visiting a few days or whatever, I'm always looking. I'm always watching people, just attitudes, temperament, how people speak to each other, all of that stuff, because I think that's just really important to the whole kind of atmosphere of how the road culture is when you're out there touring. And, and if people come up and ask you some things or ask you advice or whatever, I mean, that's always a nice thing, but I always try and stay out of the real nitty gritty of things, I still have my tuppence worth in when I'm standing in front of the house, and if I don't think I hear something.
Oh, damn it. There's too loud.
Don't you think that, sometimes I just got to just bite your lip.
Sure, definitely. You brought up an interesting point, and we our audience is a lot of audio students and educators and whatnot. There's a lot of people we talk to who are younger and just coming up in the industry. And you brought up an interesting point that I think is related to this, and at the same time is almost a general and global statement, and that is the idea of learning to read people. And I think that's something that is so important. And when you were coming up, when I was coming up, there weren't pro audio schools and there weren't formal educational processes like there are now. And so a lot of it was learned on the fly and by the seat of our pants and all of that. At the same time, I think that there are certain skills that really, I don't know if they can't be taught, but they're much more difficult to teach. You can teach someone how to run a console. You can teach them how to stack a PA and whatnot, but you really can't teach them how to relate to people and how to understand basic human psychology, and especially the psychology of an artist. Live shows are, as you say, incredibly spontaneous. The creative process is very, very fragile, and you're right in the middle of that. And sometimes some of those really spur of the moment decisions can make or break an evening or even an entire tour. People can get pissed off and leave a tour in the middle or something like that. I think those people skills that you're talking about, those are incredibly valuable.
Oh, completely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not saying I'm fabulous at them, but, I've learned a lot, obviously, myself through the years, making wrong decisions and talking to people in a certain way that, I just kick myself for now, or kick me back then if I was like that, but it's just that's all a learning process, and taking everything on board and actually looking at the big picture of everything that you're doing and what you want to achieve yourself through doing what you're doing, and adjusting accordingly, and just being nice to people, and it doesn't cost anything to be nice to people. I've seen so many people be so rude, as I'm sure you've seen as well, that some crews walk in and they treat the local crew like shit, and well, you're not going to get the best out of those people if that's how you're going to start the day off. You've got 12 hours working with those people. So, they're around, get the best out of them by just getting on their side from the get-go without overdoing it. But, it doesn't cost anything to be nice. And, you might weed out one or two locals who are kind of nasty in their own way, which then you choose your guys, you choose the people who you deal with, and that's where you're going to get the best of everything out of,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and yeah, dealing with just situations on the road through the years, whether it be people's personal situations, things that they're going through, listening to people, talking to people, and now it's all, you know, it's all been really looked upon, like the whole mental health issues in our business, which is a really important factor in everything that's going on right now. So, but you know, we never had anything like that back then. We just had all each other to kind of fall on, talk about things, and try and look for that support through someone else who you're on the road with for 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever. And I think one learns a lot by doing all of that and dealing with all those different people, and you know, try to be that kind of shoulder, as it were, if you can, for that person to cry on or whatever they need to do, and just try and help them through it, you know.
Because you're sort of in a bubble in a sense. And
Yeah.
even I think, you know, to a certain extent, it's probably changed a lot now. I mean, I haven't been on the road in a long, long time as well, but, you know, I know that it has changed, of course, now because we have different modes of communication. You know, we didn't have the internet and FaceTime and all of those kind of things. But at the same time, you're still, you know, once you get off that phone call with your loved one several thousand miles away, you're still in this bubble with this group of people. And yeah, as you say, I mean, there's a certain psychological dependence on each other. You're locked into this group of people. And yes, it comes down to, of course, treating people nicely, but also there's a certain empathy there that one must have in order to survive this kind of environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've done pretty well so far. You've managed to get to this point with it. What's next for you?
What's next? It's
you going on the road again?
Well, I probably will be with Iggy. He's the only one I ever really kind of go out on the road with these days. But it's a lot more of a luxury than it used to be. And he doesn't really do back-to-backs or heavy schedule, so it's paced really nicely. So, and he travels in a really comfortable way. So it's generally him and I that travel, and the band and crew are kind of, they're in their own bubble, as it were, you know. Mm-hmm. So that's next for me in terms of, I guess, long-term traveling on the road stuff, which will be from the end of April next year. But at the moment, you know, we've got a couple of record releases with some of our other clients, so that's what we're working on right now.
That's a whole other set of skills.
Well, yeah, and particularly now dealing with record labels, because, you know, that whole side of the business has changed so much. Completely. And you're expected to do a hell of a lot more than what you used to do in the past. And you would be relying on them, whereas they're now reliant on you in a lot of ways to deliver certain things to make their job easy. And it's a whole different, it's a lot harder work now, and it's
promotion's different.
You're wearing so many of those hats, dealing with all the different people.
And promoting is different now, because now it's all directly to the audience. It's through social media. There's not a lot of the traditional channels anymore.
Yeah, and the social media stuff, again, you know, all that's handled through our office. So, you know, they rely on us for a lot of that stuff and the assets and everything else. Mm-hmm. We try and work with them and give them ideas to think out the box, which a lot of them seem to have the same ideas and the same thought every time with every release with every artist, and every artist is different and needs something completely set up in a different way from maybe what they were doing before. So talking them through all of that stuff, and again, my partner Anya, she's the one that negotiates a lot of that stuff with them and gets frustrated on a day-to-day basis dealing with them. Mm-hmm. So it's so I mean that drains you a lot by the end of the day, and you've dealt with all of that stuff. It's
Yeah. And as you say, I mean, you're really, because you're dealing with so many diverse artists, you're dealing with so many diverse audiences.
Yeah.
And you have to speak to each of them in a different voice, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and all different levels of it's from like 200 or 300 capacities going up to like 5,000 or 6,000 capacities or more.
Mhm.
So it's like you could just tailor the type of audience and just looking at their streamings on a day-to-day basis and like try to get all the numbers up for there and all that kind of stuff. So it's
sounds exhausting just thinking about it. Mm-hmm. So last question for you. What kind of advice would you give to 15, 16-year-old person who comes to you now and says, I want to be in the business, other than run?
Yeah. Don't. No, I mean, I think a lot of people now, young kids, get into it for different reasons. And a lot of people see, like a lot of the let's say the manufacturer, the pop stars that are made on TV through competitions or that kind of stuff. That's a completely different world, and a lot of people look at that and go, "Oh yeah, I want to be part of that." And it's so that's a different kind of mindset of
That's
someone
theater.
who wants to be in this business.
Yeah, that's theater more than music, I think.
Yeah, but if you get someone who's actually interested, and again, that's just something you would tell, I guess, a bunch of kids, and they in themselves in their heads will know what they want. You want to learn the craft of certain things relating to the business from the ground up, not just walking into something and that's how it's done, because it's not. You really need to learn your craft from the bottom up, and whatever way that works these days, whether it's being an intern in an office or having a summer job at an audio company or whatever it is. But I mean, you just have to have the enthusiasm and the will to want to do something like that, and actually learn from people. I mean, people are going to take advantage of them because of who they are and being young and stuff, and give them the runaround. But get through all of that. It's just all part of like growing up and making you into a real person, as it were. And so yeah, I mean, I just find yourself. Ask yourself the question, what you really want to do in terms of if you want to be in this business, and then really focus and hone in on it and work hard at doing that particular part.
Easier said than done, eh?
I know.
It's a long process. It really is. And that's, having the benefit of the hindsight of so many years of it. But it takes longer than we think. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, and as you say now, there's all sorts of like colleges and courses, and there's tour management courses, there's audio course, and it's just there's courses for everything these days. It's like, and I guess it's like some people like me who have been in the business a while are in teaching, doing that kind of stuff. Who are the better ones to be doing it? Who have been through the whole thing. Some others are just teaching it from books, basically, whatever they've learned through the years by either books or in different ways, but not physically being in the workshop floor, like doing it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and that's interesting because a lot of people who know it so intrinsically can't really teach it.
No,
that's a different set of skills, really.
Yeah. And I think we all grew up in this for, as we said, for different reasons, being music fans, being enthusiastic, want to have a bit of fun, no kind of like, I'm not doing that because I'm this. And, it just, you just got there and you did it all and you figured yourself out by the end of that. And I know a lot of people who did all of that with me who just kind of fell by the wayside and said, this is not for me. But for me, I wanted to travel. That was another thing I really wanted to do. So it was just opened the door for me. Once I traveled and I saw other countries and other cultures, it just kind of blew my mind in a way that you can go from 1 hour to the next and be in a different country, speaking different language, deal with different currencies, whole different ball game of things. And going through all of that and all those changes was just a big challenge in itself, and being able to cope with it, So it's, yeah.
Very good. Wonderful. Well, Henry Grogan, thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you, Daniel, for having me.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure catching up with you.
You too. Thanks again.
Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.